Welcome to Civil Science Academy. Today we are starting our journey with History NCERT Class 6 of Chapter 1 What, Where, How and When. From today onwards, I will be covering the entire NCERT history series from Class 6 to Class 12 step by step. So make sure you keep an eye on this channel because in the coming days you will get regular updates and new chapters one after another. And don't worry, my lectures will be short, simple and to the point. So no unnecessary time wastings, only clear explanations that will help you in the UPSC preparation. So without any delay, let's dive into chapter 1, what, where, how and when. Now, this unit is all about the past. So how we study the past and how people lived in those times and when there was no modern technology. But even in those early days, there were herders, farmers, rurals and merchants, priests, scientists and even musicians also. So life was not simple or empty. The people had their own professions and ways of living. So now, where did people live? The most of them lived along the banks of rivers. And why rivers? Because water is the most important resource for survival. That's why people always settle near the rivers. And before farming began, the earliest people were called skilled gatherers. They collected fruits, roots and other food from forest, and they also hunted the animals to survive. They knew which plants were useful and which were dangerous and how to use the resources around them. But then came a big change. The people slowly learned how to grow a crops. The first crop they grew were the wheat and barley around 8,000 years ago. This is very important to remember that wheat and barley is 8,000 years ago. Such questions are often asked in exams like UPSC Prelims. Okay. Later, people also began rearing animals such as sheep, goats and cattle. With this, they started living in the villages. Now, let's look at the physical map of India. You will notice the many rivers flowing to this region. Along these rivers, different cultures and settlements also developed. For example, rice was the first grown to the north of the Vindhyas. So please remember this point. And around 2,500 years ago, cities began to develop along the banks of Ganga and its tributaries as well as along the sea coast. Why the sea coast? Because sea coast became important center for merchants. Ship carried cargo, goods and people, making trade easier. In the south of the Ganga region, there were the kingdom of Magadha, located in what is now in Bihar. Rivers played a big role in making kingdoms powerful, and Magadha grew into one of the strongest one. And remember, in those days, people were always on the move. They traveled from one region to another and carrying goods, ideas and culture with them. As I told you earlier, people in the past used to travel a lot, but remember, traveling in those days was not easy. Think about it, there were no proper vehicles, the terrain was tough, there were Himalayas, desert, floods and rough roads. So people mostly traveled in caravans or on foot or with the help of animals like sheep and camels. It was slow and difficult. But then, you may ask, if traveling was so hard, why did they still travel? The reason is very interesting. The movement of people enriched our culture. Means whenever people moved from one place to another, they carried their ideas, traditions and cultures with them. They shared knowledge with the new regions, and in return they also learned new things also. This is how our cultural traditions grew richer and richer. Now let's talk about the names of the land. The word India comes from the river Indus, which is in ancient times was called Sindhu. Another name is Bharata. This was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest, and they are also mentioned in the Rig Veda. These are very important fact to remember. Now next comes to manuscripts. What are manuscripts? The word itself gives the meaning. Manu means hand. So manuscripts were written by hand, and they were usually written on palm leaves or even specially prepared bark of the beech tree. If you see the image in your book, you will notice how they are looked. Okay, then what did manuscript contain? The teachings of gurus or religious belief and practices, the rules of kings, medicines and science, even literature and stories also. And remember, many of these manuscripts were written in Sanskrit or in Prakrit. Now let's look at inscriptions. Inscriptions were curved on the hard surfaces like stone or metal. In kings often used inscriptions to record their victories in battles or their orders, rules, and achievements. So manuscripts were written on the soft material like leaves or barks, and inscriptions were written on the hard material like stone or metal. The study of all these old things is called as archaeology. And archaeologist is a person who studies the remains of past or objects, buildings, tools, coins, and so on. Now comes an important point. Our past is not the same for everyone. One person past could be very different from another. For example, the life of a farmer was very different from life of a king. The life of a merchant was different from that of craft person. So ordinary people usually did not keep written records. So we know the less about them compared to kings and rulers. So there are many past, not just one. So finally, let us understand the dates. Dates are usually counted from the birth of the Christ, the founder of Christianity. For example, the year 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. In all the years before his birth were written as before Christ. In this system of dating is followed all over the world. Okay, and with that we have come to an end of unit 1. So keep learning, stay curious, and revise these important points. In the next video I will continue with unit 2. And yes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Civil Science Academy. Now take care. See you soon.